What I do could be called graphic design. It's how I make a living. But what I do with my life is travel. I've lived all across America, and I regularly take vacations to English-speaking parts of the world. This means I don't have many material possessions, and that I don't make many lasting connections with people. I never struggle too hard to make new friends when I move, but when I move again, they usually just become another random Facebook friend I talk to once a year. About 2 years ago, I moved from Portland, Oregon to Jackson, Mississippi. I was in Portland for a little over a year, a rather long stay considering I normally only stay put for around 6 or 7 months. The reason for my extended stay was a guy I met. As it turns out, he was just using me for sex and had no interest in me per se. That and he cheated on me without protection. My short-term goal in Oregon was to develop relationship skills. I'm not sure how to grade my success. I did learn things after all. My goal in Mississippi was to learn some practical skills. Learn to fix things and perhaps learn to hunt, better my camping skills, that kind of stuff. But I also had a secondary goal. Avoid men for a while and just date women. I decided I wouldn't even tell people I was bisexual if they asked. The hardest part about moving is always shopping for an apartment. I found a 2-bedroom apartment for $610 a month, plus water and AC. It suited my needs just fine, but I was in a hurry to move in from he who shall not be named, so I couldn't find a roommate in time to split the bill with. So I was essentially losing $305 a month on space I didn't need. When I got to the apartment complex, I was starving. I was running on a continental breakfast I got at the motel which I stayed at. I got the breakfast around 10 and it was 5. That and a latte from an understaffed Starbucks. The landlord greeted me at my car, which I thought was strange as he couldn't have known when I was arriving. But regardless, he was very cordial, if not a little overbearing. He offered to help me move in and I accepted despite not really needing any help. I didn't have much to move. But I was in a whatever mood. Anything that hurried up me getting food was fine. The landlord was pretty tall and thin. He was also very young, maybe 30, if that. Certainly young to be a landlord. He wore thick round bifocals. He was dressed in jeans, a wife beater, and an unbuttoned yellow dress shirt when I first met him. I vividly remember this because the sun was bright enough to give me a headache, and his reflective shirt didn't help. The southern twang in his voice was rather subdued compared to the other people I had met at the Starbucks and at the gas station. So I hadn't even seen my room yet, and a complete stranger was helping me unpack 2 luggage cases full of clothes and a few other personal items, a book bag, and an open box with a few sentimentals. When I popped the trunk, he had his eyes stuck on something in the open cardboard box. I wasn't sure what he was looking at until later. With him being scrawny, I handed him the box, which was easily lighter than either of the luggage cases. I put the bag on my back and started hauling my luggage cases on their wheels. While going up the 2 flights of stairs to get to my apartment, Keith, this landlord, dropped my box of belongings, breaking my Hello Kitty lamp. Now he profusely apologized and instantly offered to buy me a new lamp, and even offered to let me borrow one in the meantime, but I was silently steaming over it. I loved that thing, and I didn't even want this guy helping me out. I just wanted to eat some McDonald's in an empty apartment while watching some mindless cartoons on YouTube. But luckily, my Derpy Hooves statue was fine. Once we made it to my apartment, I told Keith I wanted to be alone and just eat, and that's when he offered to buy me some Chinese food. So we were sitting, chatting, and eating in an empty room with light blue walls and the blinds were up for light. It was a fine room, but certainly not my favorite living arrangement that I've had. Keith was very curious about me. I explained how my online freelancing allows me to travel, how I was hoping to better my survival craft, how I was planning on taking up bike riding, general stuff. He seemed genuinely interested in me, and didn't think to talk about himself. He said that they have great internet, best in the state, he said. He offered to help me haul my furniture to my room when it arrived. I said the delivery people would help for most of it, but that he could help with the couch that I found on Craigslist. That's where I sell all my furniture when I move. Anyway, I must have been a little hangry because, once I ate, I really wasn't mad about the lamp anymore. Keith took me on a tour of the arcade/laundry room, as well as the pool. The pool was startlingly clean for an apartment pool. Keith asked about a roommate. He said he was looking for a roommate for me as well, a woman specifically. When I explained I'd prefer a guy roommate so things were less awkward, he sorta said, come on, let me set you up. This douchey attitude made me somewhat uncomfortable. Still, I didn't want to burn any bridges. Before Keith went back to doing whatever it is that landlords do, he suggested a survival group he knew about. I thought I'd pass. I didn't really want to hang out with any end-of-the-world types. The rest of the afternoon, I marathoned episodes of regular show. It's not my favorite show in the world, but I was in the mood for it. I also continued my search for a roommate and a decent bicycle. The internet was indeed rather good, but there was a little bit of a hiccup at moments. I didn't pay much mind to it at first, too busy relaxing, but it seemed that the slowdown happened when entering previously unvisited sites, so I doubted it was a neighbor torrenting stuff at the source of the problem. In the middle of the night, Keith stopped by with a new little lamp, a black one. He said it was for me and apologized again. I just wanted to sleep. The next day, I ventured out to a local coffee shop to work. The furniture wouldn't arrive till the next day, so the coffee house was more relaxing than home. I began to feel a feeling I've rarely felt. I felt like I wasn't home. Home changes for me all the time. But at the time, I felt like making friends would be hard in Jackson. But I thought maybe I just needed to settle in a little more. After all, I only talked with one person in Jackson for more than a minute. I thought back on past landlords and I realized that it's a profession that just makes people weird. Or maybe it attracts weird people. Anyway, I needed to make some friends. The coffee shop had slightly better Wi-Fi. I figured I'd be spending a lot of time there. The day after that, Keith was helping me move my couch in and most of the furniture arrived. Keith asked where I was yesterday and without thinking I answered at that coffee shop down the road. When I asked why he asked, he said he was just curious. I was starting to realize I needed to limit interaction with this guy as much as possible. However, neither of us made progress finding a roommate for myself. With a fully furnished apartment, I still felt like I was on a trip or a journey. I often use those terms to describe my life, but normally, it's a positive. In between deliveries that day, I tried to get some work done, but my laptop must have been dealing with some virus. It wasn't like any malware I was used to. The web pages I brought up would randomly change to other pages. It's hard to recall all of the things that came up, but one of them was a place to buy DVD box sets of Top Gear, a car show from the UK. That alone made me think it was purely random, or a mover was messing with me, but another page brought up a website for a survival group, and another was for a local biking enthusiast group. My virus protection found nothing. I stopped working that day and backed up all the important files that I had onto an external hard drive. I spent much of the next week at that coffee shop, working on designs and even making friends with a few of the regulars. Whatever was changing my web pages didn't show itself while at the coffee shop. While I was looking for a good bike online, a guy entered the coffee shop. Not a regular. He was wearing a yellow Nike tracksuit with a towel around his neck. This guy wasn't just wearing a tracksuit. He was wearing that tracksuit, if you get my meaning. He was dripping with sweat and I could smell his deodorant from when he walked in. Old Spice, if I'm not mistaken. He must have been in his 40s with slightly graying hair, but I wanted to nuzzle him like a papa bear nuzzles a cub. When he ordered his coffee, he kept glancing at me. After he got served, he asked to sit by me. Now, there's nothing outwardly gay about me, nothing that'd tip off a straight person, but this guy's gaydar was spot on, and he was keen on flirting me up. This guy, Jared I think his name was exactly my type of guy. But after that last relationship, I really wanted some time for myself. And honestly, I was afraid of commitment. Someone so perfect could easily lead me around. We didn't chat long and I explained the situation, but he gave me his number anyway, which I gladly received, unsure of whether or not I wanted to pursue him. Now, I want to be clear about this. This information isn't the kind that I typically share, but it's necessary to understand the situation I was in. Because of the bad relationship, I had problems feeling sexual. So I hadn't masturbated in like a month. I looked at porn a few times, but only porn with women, and every time I just felt a little strange and unhappy with myself. But this random guy finding me attractive and being so kind to me really boosted my confidence. It was the best thing that had happened to me in months. So that night, somewhat aroused from the day, I tried masturbating. But I was encountering a few problems. I didn't want to think about sex with men, despite the impetus for my arousal. So I looked up blonde MILF on RedTube. I still wanted a parental feel. I was looking for someone comforting and controlling, but I was continuously redirected to different parts of RedTube. No matter how many times I searched for blonde MILF, I was redirected to the results for teenage redhead. So I went on to PornTube and typed in blonde MILF, and again, I was redirected to teenage redheads. I couldn't understand what type of virus would do this or what could be gained from it besides kicks, but I didn't want to pass up this opportunity. It would be a catharsis to get over my hang-ups from the breakup. So I found a video of a strawberry blonde teen making out with an Asian girl and went to bed. Not satisfied, just content. While brushing my teeth and wearing nothing the next morning, my doorbell rang. I wrapped one of my only 2 towels, a Powerpuff Girls one, around my waist and looked out the peephole on my door. It was Keith holding a knife. I did up the door chain lock and asked what he wanted. He said he had a survival knife that he wanted to give me. Keith struck me as rather naive. I deduced the fact that he was clearly brandishing a knife was unintentional. I explained that I was naked, and he said he'd come back later. I told him he could keep the knife, but he said, "Don't worry about it, I have my own knife, I'll be back," and all this shit. I was starting to think I should just tell him to leave me alone. I started to wonder if he's in other people's business this much. But he was only trying to be nice. Because of my lifestyle, I keep very few clothes and it was laundry day. So while I was rendering an advertisement for an alcoholic beverage called Spodie, I made my way down to the laundry room and arcade. When I entered carrying a garbage bag of clothes, I laid eyes on the most unassuming ginger girl in a black sweatshirt and matching black sweatpants. Her features were fair, and her skin was peppered with freckles, as well as metal piercings. Her hair was dyed electric red, and was pushed back in a ponytail. She was playing the Simpsons arcade game, and she quickly turned to greet me when I opened the glass door, only to turn back with something no one would call a poker face directed at the glass screen. When she said hey, I said hey back. Once I got my laundry in, this girl and myself, Janice her name was, we got to playing the Simpsons game together and talking. Her accent was different from what I had gotten used to when I found out she moved to Jackson from Georgia just a month ago. Now we were having a lovely conversation, and she was very forward with her friendliness. A breath of fresh air from the stuffiness of Portland, I can tell you that. But I was mildly concerned at some of the things she mentioned. I guess when she moved in, Keith was acting very similar to her as he was acting to me. When they were chatting, she mentioned that she liked red velvet Oreos, and he came by in the middle of the night to give her a package of them. She threw them in the trash, afraid that there was something wrong with them. Then he suggested that she should come see some local bands with him. She shot him down. But then he said something about not minding lesbians unlike homos, and that set her off. Personally, the Oreo thing would have upset me more. But I wondered if we were being hypersensitive. Maybe it was just autism or Asperger's or some similar disorder, where he didn't pick up on social cues. But she framed these incidences like a warning to avoid him. Honestly, I don't know how she still felt safe. I was beginning to feel unsafe myself. That talk gave me some conflicting feelings. Looking back on Portland at the time, I just liked the experience and the personality of the place. But I was judging that based off one guy and a few bad apples. I was starting to do the same thing in Jackson after less than 2 weeks there. I never thought of myself as judgmental, but I simply couldn't deal with someone so different than myself. Keith, that is. I couldn't deal with Keith. It became clear that I had to cut as many ties as I could to him the next time I saw him, which I guess would be later that day. This conversation with Janice, which wasn't all about Keith's weirdness, although, if we're being honest, once it was brought up, that's all I could think about, was pleasant enough. We talked about our favorite moments from The Simpsons, our favorite metal bands, fun stuff. She had tons of piercings, not a single tattoo, a cool lady. But somewhere during the conversation, I noticed the camera was overlooking the laundry arcade room. Logically, I known it couldn't have had an audio recorder. Hell, I doubt it was even on, but something about it made me uncomfortable. Like Keith could hear us. That spurred my decision to shift the conversation towards more trivial things. Later that day, Keith showed up at my door, again with a knife, but also a red-headed woman. A very attractive red-headed woman. As it turns out, this woman was named Christy, and she wanted to move in. Keith showed her around after handing me the knife and explaining in agonizing detail all of its features. It was just a fucking knife. I decided that if I needed to talk to him about his overbearingness, it could wait. Keith and Christy sat on my couch discussing the place after we exchanged pet peeves to see if such a living arrangement could work. I went to the bathroom, and when I returned, it seemed Christy agreed to live with me. She'd be moving in that weekend. Now again, it's not normally my prerogative to tell people about my masturbation habits, but problems similar to before arose again that night. I saw masturbating as a step in the right direction towards feeling comfortable with other people again. Seeing black women around the coffee shop and the black beauty salon next door to it put me in that kind of mood. So I typed Ebony into RedTube's search bar, but I was again redirected, this time to big tit gingers, which, if we're being nitpicky, is grammatically incorrect. Frustrated, I typed in Ebony Woman, Ebony MILF, Ebony Anal. Everything was redirected. Teen ginger, cute ginger, this ginger, that ginger. After like 10 tries to find a video of a black woman fucking on camera, the search redirected to a video of a red-headed girl using a little silver vibrator on a clearly uncomfortable brunette girl, who I'm assuming wasn't actually a lesbian. When I tried to click away by searching for something else, the internet seemed to freeze. But hitting refresh played the video fine. I opened up YouTube and just searched for funny cats to see if it worked. Everything was functioning fine, but when porn came up, it refused to let me watch anything other than red-headed girls and mildly uncomfortable ones, usually both at the same time. Any arousal I had was gone and I went to bed, discontent with many, many things. When I tried to sleep, I woke up an hour later, turned on again. I took that opportunity to jack off and finger myself. It was less about the orgasm and more about the metaphorical release. The next morning, before leaving for the coffee shop, I noticed my Derpy Hoofs toy was missing from its place on the shelf above the kitchen sink. That frustration from the night before returned. I got into a habit of petting her before leaving, sort of a good luck ritual for the day. I hate that feeling of a misplaced item. Right before walking out the door, I glanced at the knife beside my TV, the one Keith gave me. The rest of the week, before Christy moved in, I began to notice just how many red-headed women, young women, lived in my apartment block, in a predominantly black area too. Maybe it was just the internet thing drawing my attention to every redhead I saw, but I began to spend less and less time at home. I can't tell you how much coffee I drank while in Jackson. I finally found a decent bike for a really low price, the day before Christy moved in. The person selling it met me behind my apartment block by a dumpster, and while we were there, I found my Derpy statue, resting against a trash bag. The clearly conservative gentleman I purchased the bike from was puzzled when I picked up the pony toy, and I made my way back to my apartment. It was just then that it was starting to dawn on me. Something, I didn't know what, was going wrong. and I needed to find another place to stay. Christy was moving in, and that meant that Keith was there helping move in Christy. I offered to help instead, but Keith suggested we both help. She had a lot more stuff than me. While taking a break, Keith was getting some water at the sink, and I saw him holding my derpy toy. I gave him a look, and he put it back on the shelf. "What a strange toy," he said. "Its eyes are messed up." I told him they're supposed to be that way. The whole time we were moving, Keith wouldn't take his eyes off Christy. Later that night, with Christy and myself having a bottle of wine and getting to know one another, I asked her if she noticed anything strange about Keith. She said no and asked if I did. I think that she, like Keith, was very naive about things, or she knew he was leering at her like a doofus and didn't care because it made hauling boxes easier. Now this is the last time I'll bring up private matters, but very, very tired, I retired to my room, hoping to continue my recovery. I put on my headphones and brought up RedTube. Unable to lie to myself anymore, I searched for gay dilfs. And nothing happened. Firefox just froze on a white screen, refreshing to nothing, but 2 minutes later, I heard a knock at the door. Both Christy and myself exited our rooms, and she asked, "Who could that be?" Silently, I motioned for her to stay back, and I approached the door to see Keith through the peephole, again holding a knife. But his happy-go-lucky, naive face was gone. He knocked again. I gingerly placed the chair against the doorknob and tiptoed to the knife Keith gave me, then motioned for Christy to enter her room. I followed her and locked the door. I called 911 and whispered the situation. Christy was shaking as I described the problem I was facing, and she was now facing. The 911 operator instructed me to stay on the line, and all the while Keith was pounding on the door, saying things to the effect of, "It's Keith, we need to talk." The way I was talking to the operator must have confused them. She didn't understand the situation exactly. Neither did I. I just kept telling Christy to be quiet. About 10 minutes later, I heard yelling from a voice other than Keith's. "Drop the knife, drop the knife." I can't be sure of what transpired after that, but the second drop the knife command hadn't even exited the officer's mouth before I heard a barrage of gunfire. When the police finally yelled for me to open the door, there was a pool of blood under their feet dripping off the second-story walkway. They took Keith to the hospital, but he was dead before he got there. I'm not sure what was going on exactly, per se, but I've pieced together the important parts. It ultimately took another 2 months for me to find another place to live. Christy tagged along, not rooming with me, but still living in the same apartment complex I discovered. While still back at the old apartments, she was rather upset. I had to stay strong for her, and we became good friends. When I finally did move away from Jackson, I did so with a positive outlook on it, in the grand scheme of things, and a lot more mature than I was before when I arrived. I kept that knife in a drawer for a while. I didn't know how to feel about it. It was, after all, a gift from a person who tried to kill me, and for not conforming to his lifestyle, no less. Or at least that's what I'm assuming. But now I keep it. It travels with me. If Portland taught me about relationships, despite the bitterness of the experience, then Jackson definitely taught me about survival. So this survival knife always goes into my box, right beside Derpy.